When Jim Dwyer says they're in the lanes high-fiving each other, they're not going, we got a bunch of black guys. They're just happy that they're now going to have another notch on their gun. They've got another thing that they've done. The thing where race comes in for me is where they realize somewhere along the line, every single one of them, that they made a mistake. And each one of them said, somewhere, it doesn't matter. They're just a bunch of black kids. That's what happened. That's what happened. And they would rather let these guys rot in jail than to say, you know what, I screwed up. I think Captain, I think Commissioner, I think Mr. Mayor, we got to open this thing up again. This stinks. I'm upset. Nobody did that because it's just a bunch of black guys.
Question over to the left.
Thank you. My name is Jason Leiden. Thank you so very much for being here. And I'm actually having a really hard time with that last statement. This would not have happened to me
Nope.
as a white man, as a young white man who grew up in the suburbs. What happened to you would not have happened.
West
to me,
Memphis.
Period. Sure. So in terms of what I'm curious about for you all is that one of the things that's so powerful about this film is that you are innocent. One of the things that's so powerful is that people are going to say this shouldn't have happened to you, but this shouldn't happen to anybody. And so how for you all, in terms of thinking about how this impacts the criminal injustice system, goes after and destroys the lives of young black and brown men every day, all of the time, how can this keep getting sympathy with your innocence, such an important aspect of the story, trickle into the fact that our police, this is what they do. And the Boston Herald does what those newspapers did every day. Mm-hmm. That there's nothing new about what happened, it hasn't gone away. So how do you see this playing into and shaping, hopefully, an even larger conversation that the beauty and power of your innocence, and also that this is for everyone?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing that we do is we come out and we come into venues like this, and you get people to start discussing and put together discussion, and somebody comes up with a solution. That's number one. So, it's starting in the beginning. We don't have all the answers, but we have to do our part, and everybody just does their part, we can move a whole lot faster. And so this is what we do. That's one thing. And then the second part to it was that we knew that because in 1989 we were 14 and 15 and 16-year-old Corey was 16, and nobody wanted to invest in us. Everybody just threw us away. And so we decided to invest our time into the kids. And so we teamed up with the Innocence Project, and we go to high schools, and we go to colleges, and we talk. And at first we thought it was gonna be, we didn't know it was gonna work, because to have 200 kids in the room, with a film, and they're probably gonna get bored, want to go to the bathroom, start talking, throwing paper, and when the lights go off, nobody moves. And right there we knew this is it. This is what we got to do. And so we just do our part at the end of the day, and that's all we can do. If us going out and talk saves another Trayvon Martin, hey, I'm happy with that. I did my job. Yeah.
Yes. We believe that we have a calling to do this. It's funny. Before I met Ken, Sarah, and Dave, I'm 38 right now. I really didn't know my point in life, actually, because it was taken away from me. And this gave all of us the platform to do so. I was very shy. I'm still a little reserved. But I was, now I feel, God is talking to me that I have to do this. My mother always told me that the truth will come out, So it's only right to be physically used in any way to make this better. Like Ray said, it starts right here, and we need the power of the people to keep this thing going.
Question over to the right.
My question is as follows. A great relief that you're out and able to be here today. It's a wonderful thing. There are many who are not. One of whom I think actually is not even African American, is Leonard Peltier, who has been in prison for decades, and since 1984, at least the FBI admits fully they have nothing on him, but he's there for what he stands for. I'm wondering if the panel can address what we can do to begin to change our criminal justice system so that it stops holding up specific individuals as symbols and keeping them in prison, even political prisoners in this country, so that we can change what can we in this room do to change this so that this country starts going in a different direction.
That's about as old as, 1619 and the Declaration of Independence. It's gonna take a lot more than this panel to move that ship around. I think it's incremental. Each of us has a role to play. Each of us has talents that we can devote to that. I mean, certainly I'm looking at my friend Skip Gates, who's spent most of his professional life in the service of your question. I'm sitting at a panel with my friend who has done the same thing. Many of you in this room are so dedicated. Obviously, you see the transformation that's taken place in not only Kevin and Raymond, but me. And I can tell you it's Sarah and Dave as well, and how much this film, we're supposed to be working on another film right now, the three of us, and we can't. This is demanded of us. And there are specific educational things that we've all brought up tonight that can be done, and these are the incremental steps. But what you have to have is a sort of large scale. It's every single question that's been asked tonight has as part of it, what can I do? Sometimes it's framed in a more political way, as yours was, but I think it really has to come back to you. What will I now do? Coming off 2 hours of time spent unpleasantly, what will I now do? How will I act? How will I conduct myself? Will I actually write that letter? Yeah, oh, sure, that's a good idea, Ken. But if 10% write that letter, that's unbelievable. But isn't it unbelievable that 90% said, yeah, I'll write a letter to Mayor Bloomberg, but didn't? And so a lot of us spend a good deal of our lives in that kind of acquiescence to what is. And you know what? I'm so proud of my daughter, and maybe before I cry, Raymond and Kevin can talk about the fact that nobody had ever cared or listened to them until Sarah came along. And, they weren't going to do something for just about anybody.
Yeah, I mean, so, we always grateful to Sarah at the end of the day, because this was a woman who was on her way to law school. We didn't even know who her father was. I was like, who's Ken Burns? I know. They was like, here, watch a couple of movies. And I'm like, all right, I'll watch Jack Johnson. But
which was called Unforgivable Blackness, may I say.
That was the first movie I saw. But this was a woman who put her career on the line for us. And when a person steps out, I mean, like Ken said, if more people would do that, then things would get done a whole lot faster and we can move to a better place. And we felt that if she was going to do that and put herself out there, we had to do it double, and even to this day, like, we're still going around and she just texted me today and said, are we doing Yale tomorrow? And I'm like, I'm tired. Guys had me since September running around. So, but when a person steps up like that, you have to answer, and I think that's also a reason why, the four of us, even Antron, when he can, he steps up and he comes out and because it's just that powerful.
These guys all have PTSD, right? Can we understand that? They all have PTSD. And in some ways, Antron, we were talking about this the other night in Harlem. We showed at a Harlem theater called Mist, and we had a really good crowd. It was the Association of New York State Black Journalists. And, this is also a story about PTSD, to add the layers to the excellent question that was asked about race, about sexuality, all of that. These guys have suffered from that. Imagine, my mother died when I was 11. It's something that has haunted me and informed every aspect of who I am. This event is the same sort of being ripped out. And Antron has left. He changed his name. He lives in the South. He's got a job as a forklift operator. He's come up once, and that was for the end of the Doc NYC Film Festival, and ran right back, and we've been unable to pry him out. And we think we've lured him back to a mid-April, the night after the national broadcast. The New York Times is doing a Times talk at their auditorium in New York City, and Antron is going to come up and be with us. But he goes through every moment of every day waiting for that hand to come on his shoulder and say, Antron McRae, come this way. and in a kind of Kafkaesque, Orwellian, end of life, that's what happens. And I think what the four who have remained in New York in varying degrees of success, Corey really struggles, but Raymond and Kevin and Youssef have really helped transform what's happened to them into something positive. And so for those of us with abstract questions, let's move them from the abstract into the real and try to actually do something. That's a really important thing.
And just let me say for the audience, some of you know and some of you don't, PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a medical analysis, psychological analysis of a lot of people who've gone through what they've gone through. Just the trauma of being accused, but then spending all the time that they spend in jail, and then they had to see some of the papers. They still did it. Right? People just did not change their mind. And I think that's why I hope people will take Ken up on his request that we don't just say it was a very good discussion, a very powerful movie, but we're going to do something. I think that's going to be very important. Next question.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. My name is Sharon Frey-Witzer. I'm a criminal defense attorney, among other things. And I thought that one thing that the movie did really well was portray the degree to which you are crime victims to an equal or at least greater or greater extent than anyone else in this story. And so as crime victims, as well as the subjects of the criminal investigation process, I wonder if you'd be willing to speak to us about how, if you could wave a magic wand, you would change the process of criminal investigation to produce more reliable results or truth and protect people like yourselves as you go through the process.
Okay. Well, one thing actually working on is from the beginning, when the teenagers picked up, right away the film is on. They're being videotaped. Because with our case, it was 30 hours. Our parents was not there, but they made it seem like our parents was right next to us. So one thing would be to have the film rolling as soon as a kid is picked up, because there's a lot that goes on within those hours.
Another thing that we advocate for is holding these agencies accountable. Social service, juvenile justice. If somebody, because we understand that kids don't know their rights. We understand they don't know the law, and 8 times out of 10, the parent doesn't know either. And so, like Ken said earlier, because you come across authority figures, your first instinct is, they'll tell you, well, you didn't do nothing wrong, right? So you have nothing to worry about. And so right there, we're trying to please them, and we're trying to cooperate. And there needs to be somebody from these agencies there also who can give a helping hand on the professional side. And I think that's something that's missing. A person from these agencies shouldn't come after it's done and want to take your kid away and do a report on them on all the bad things in his life. No, it should be done before. Let's try to save some kids before they actually enter into the system.
There was a man who died last fall named George Whitmore. His obituary in the New York Times was quite interesting. He was an African-American gentleman from Queens who had gone in to help the police solve a series of crimes and ended up being convicted of these crimes. He was innocent, and he proclaimed his innocence, and the New York tabloids and newspapers went after this and sort of collectively proved to the city and the police department that this man was innocent and he was exonerated, and this led to Miranda. This led to the reinstatement of the death penalty in New York State.
Next question.
My question is much more personal. I'm in awe of your strength and courage. I'm trying to get my head around that. 40 years ago, when I was at this law school, I was in voluntary offenders, and I went to prisons to help inmates then. How did you deal with it at 14 and 15 years old, knowing that you were innocent? And to come out and to survive that. I'm just in awe. I just don't know what to say.
Me too.
The truth, it is the truth. This is my secret. I have no idea. I really don't. You know, you're put into a situation and everything's closed around you, and you feel the only direction you have is to go forward. That's it. And that was it for us. I mean, and you know, we came across numerous situations throughout that time in prison. You know, my mom was passed when I was in prison. And the only thing I knew I had to do was go forward, because I knew that somewhere there's a door there and I got to reach it. And you know, I mean, also we were blessed. In the same process, we were blessed that we were able to come back out and survive that and come and talk to people and do the things we do. And that also is, you know, for those who are very spiritual, is where your faith gets restored. You know, I don't know why we went through this process, and I always tell people, I said, look, you know, if God wanted me to learn something, he could have did it a whole nother way. We didn't have to go through this. Come on now, you're the Almighty. Make something quick, easy. You know, but it is what it is, and we're here today. You know.
Wow, that's a good question. Someone was looking over us, you know, that we all came back out alive. To be quite frank, we came out alive. We, like Yusuf said in the film, it didn't vacate the prison term. We really went through that at 14, 15 years old. You know, we lost our youth. We lost going to the prom. We just lost being kids. I remember telling Raymond something a long time ago in '89 that, well, all we have is each other. So let's try to get through this together. And like Raymond said, it is a true blessing that we came out of this, and we're here to talk to you today. And wow.
I would just like to add, sir, because I've spent the last several years in awe of that same thing, the lack of bitterness, the intelligence, the wisdom, the compassion, the forbearance, the affirmation in the face of adversity that they exhibit almost to a man. Let's remember, offered plea deals, they did not take them. Offered chance at parole, if they would admit their guilt, they did not do that. All through the place, they held true to themselves. It's an amazing thing, and Corey, who has a learning disability of some kind, and it's sort of clear, in some ways says it best and most poetically when he says, you know, hearing that, meaning Mateus Reyes' confession, he says, and all the trials and tribulations, the scuffling, the jumping on, the stabbings. Now, let us not think of these prison sentences as something abstract, right? We have our images of what the hell prison must be, but in Corey's reticent, difficult, but perfect description is a sense of what they've gone through. The scufflings, the jumping ons, the stabbings, all the trials and tribulations. That says it all. And the fact that they have come out the other side, all of them, with some renewed purpose is a marvelous thing. I share your awe at that.
I think it's worth saying to Raymond and Kevin, and I appreciate someone with your experience, that in many respects, they talk a lot about what's happened since 1989, and there's very few disparaging words about lawyers. Yeah. But the lawyers, but the reality is that lawyers played a very pivotal role on both sides of this case. Yes. And that's one of the biggest problems. I spent 8 years as a public defender, and I know how tough it is, and how lawyers often just presume clients are guilty. You wouldn't have been arrested. You wouldn't have been denied bail. You must have done something, and they're waiting for the prosecutor to prove it, and they just don't do their job. And I think this is a wake-up call. You're lucky that things, and very fortunate that the person who's responsible came forward. That doesn't happen in thousands and thousands and millions of cases. And that's great, but it's also sad that no lawyer said, let me do a little extra investigation. Let me talk to another witness. Let me talk to another detective. Let me check this DNA. Let me understand these original statements that were made. Why was there no recorder on for 30 hours? I mean, all of these things should have set off red lights. And it's not just an indictment of lawyers, but it's a wake-up call that we have to do something. We can't just simply let these things happen. And I'm glad that you are forgiving. I'm not. And I'm glad that you are, but I mean, it really is a remarkable thing that the lawyers didn't do much for you. We have time for just a few more questions before we have to close. Yep.
Yes, my name is Nate McQueen. I just wanted to say, I really don't have a question for you so much as I have a request for everybody else in this room. You know, I think that the tribulations, like you said, that you've gone through is enough. And one thing I thought was ridiculous in the movie is when Eckhart said, this proved that the system had passed, as if you had been guilty, the system would not have failed. A system based off hate, a system based off punishment will never succeed. Only a system based off reinvention and rehabilitation can succeed.
Right.
And that brings me to my next point, is that we sit together and we laugh and we watch this movie. But when are we truly gonna come together and fight this and say, enough is enough? You know what I mean? We see this every day, and a letter is not enough. No mayor is gonna change this. This is gonna come from us. That's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Well, I'm glad that you said what you said. I just had a class today where David Simon spoke, from the producer and director of The Wire, and also a former reporter for the Baltimore Sun. And he said something very similar about, you know, writing a letter is part of it, but you have to have a conscious decision that this is wrong. And you have to carry that consciousness out in terms of what you do, and jury service, talking to neighbors. And because there are people in this room, I'm not going to point them out, but who are saying, they probably really did something, right? I mean, there are people who believe that, and we have to have.
I don't think in this crowd, Charles.
Oh, I know people in this crowd.
You think Skip?
No, I don't think Skip. No. But I know people in this crowd. And the reality is that you have to understand that how could people not be as angry and frustrated and want to take some blood for what happened to them? They gave up years of their lives.
We had an interesting thing happened, which is we were showing this film in New York in 3 different theaters, and we went to almost every night. We go to a different screening, and we divide it up, and people would say, what can we do, what can we do? And we would always talk about the upcoming court case on December 19th, on January 19th, on February 19th, and on January 19th, so many people, New Yorkers, turned out that it flooded the courtroom, and it just totally shocked the prosecutors, and they had to move to bigger venues. A lot of people, I had people calling me saying, I thought they were right, we got put in a pen for an awfully long time, just sort of a holding room while the hearing went on, because they couldn't take them, and the system was, I think, duly noted what was going on.
And you should say something about the website. You mentioned it briefly.
Yeah,
so
well,
people can do that.
let Raymond and Kevin talk about that.
Well, yeah, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. There's a Central Park 5 official page on Facebook. You can go on there. There's always updates. There's a website, which is central-park-5.com. And we're always posting everything we do, whether we're speaking, the court date, addresses to the mayor. We do everything is on there, so that's the best way to connect with us. Also, if you want us to come out and speak to kids, we go. There's that, and then there's also the Innocence Project that a lot of requests go through there also.
And Yusef is a master tweeter and is on Yusef Salam.
Yeah.
They all have individual Facebook pages, but Yusef is really active in social media.
Yeah. And we'll post these as well on the W.B. Du Bois Institute website and the Charles Humphrey Houston website as well.
It was W.B. Du Bois in referring to Jack Johnson, who was the first African-American heavyweight champion, and who, when they could find no great white hope to defeat him, they went back and attacked him for his personal life. And he said that Jack Johnson had done nothing that other white boxers and ball players and even statesmen had done. That is, marrying other women and having affairs with other women. There's no difference there. It just comes down to his unforgivable blackness. And I think that in many cases, I'm making the same film over and over again. I'm really sorry to say.
Next question is on this side?
That-
This side, okay.
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, this side, okay.
Yeah, my question is kind of a follow-up on what he just said, but as I think, as one of you said, you're not the first people who have been wrongfully convicted, and as somebody else said, you are obviously clearly, like, you know, consider yourself victims of a crime. And I'm just wondering, and also you made reference, I think, Ken, to sort of truth and reconciliation. So my question is kind of a personal one. What would you want? Like, I know you have a lawsuit, but what personally would you want to hear, or what do you think people who are wrongfully convicted, what would make that better? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask you? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's far-fetched to ask for an apology because, you know, people become so arrogant and invested in their mistakes that they don't want to apologize. And so just make it right. At the end of the day, you have an opportunity, you have a chance to fix it. Just make it right. We're not sitting here debating about the money. We're not, you know, we let's just finish it. Let's end it. That's all we want to do. We want to just get to a point where we can finally put one foot in front of the other and move forward and pick up the pieces and go. That's it. That's
And what would that look like? What would making it right look like to you?
I mean, I don't want to put no price on it. I don't want to force nobody's hand to apologize. Let's sit down and just finish it. That's it. Whatever the conclusion is, let's finish it. You know, because there's a lot of other issues out there that we need to look at. You know, Central Park 5 is one out of a million, and we want to just close this chapter of the Central Park 5 and go on and fight something else. You know, we have a lot of other issues that need to be attended to.
I think that's right for us. We're not engaged, as I said before. I just think putting a big fat period at the end of this run-on sentence is what needs to be done. And that will come in whatever form. But what Raymond alludes to is this irresponsible, to my mind, lack of willingness to engage even in the conversation, that the delay of even getting to a trial and the insistence that it going to trial when in 9 times out of 10 in a room full of lawyers here, you know this would have been mediated and settled in some way. But the inability to say I'm sorry, the inability to at least accept responsibility for things done, you have policemen still believing that they acted in good faith to keep a 14-year-old under intense interrogation for 30 hours without food or water or anything else, and then videotaped a coerced confession is acting in good faith. Please.
Josie, next question.
Oh, okay. So this is obviously the law school, and there are a lot of people here, a lot of students, I'm in my 3rd year being one of them, who are interested in criminal defense and criminal justice reform, and don't have a job, that would be me, but also don't know where they're best utilized. I mean, part of the problem is going and becoming a public defender. You're working in a system that doesn't work, and you're working under laws that don't work, and you're working every day very hard, just as hard as you can, watching people get convicted and sent to jail. And working in reform, you're not always working directly with people and communities, and you're sort of running into the bureaucracy. And I think that a lot of us struggle with where, you know, we've been so blessed. You guys talk about how blessed you've been. We've been so lucky to even be here. Where do you think that we're best utilized? Where would you put us?
Can I answer? Can I just begin for 1 second, Josie? Because you're not a parent yet, and when you're a parent, you suddenly understand that it's not black and white, that it's all these shades of gray, and that we live in a university in abstraction and sort of idealization. And the real world has, and I don't mean to say that in any kind of, patronizing way to you. You know the real world as well as I do. But the real world has so many accommodations and so many compromises and so many shades of gray that you just do what you can do. And I always feel that you've got kind of two obligations to yourself. One is Socratic, that is, who am I? Who am I? What do I have to say? The question you're asking, right? We won't ever answer that for you. But you can expose yourself in a great university to the brains and the mentors and the ideas that make that perhaps possible. Who am I? And then you're required to persevere. That is to say, no path will be easy. Certainly the 5 show you that. And that from that, you've got something. And that it will, it will not always be easy going along, but Franklin Roosevelt said it was in his last inaugural, just frail and just weeks away from death, that the road of civilization was a rising road, and that it becomes your decision to decide what part of that lifting process you're going to be engaged in.
Other comments? Any other?
No, that's great.
Final 2 questions here and there. Yep.
Okay, piggybacking upon her comment, I first want to say I'd like to apologize to you gentlemen, and here's why. When you were going through your trials and tribulations, I had come out of law school 4 years earlier. So I was that person who shouldn't have let you have ineffective counsel. I was that person who was down in DC where Tree was doing his public defender work, who I was up here in Boston working in a law firm thinking I was doing the right thing for me and my family, when the truth of the matter is we saw those kinds of things happening on a daily basis. So to you, from people such as myself and those in the audience who I know were more responsible than even myself, we should have been there for you. And for that reason, I apologize. Secondly, I'll say very quickly, we here in Boston are no strangers to this, because we had a situation with the Charles Stewart where we allowed, and I don't want to say allowed as though we allowed, but we allowed because we didn't do anything about it. We systemically allowed police to go into minority neighborhoods and frisk people and have their pants down, when the truth of the matter is there were those of us who were attorneys and not attorneys and just everyday walking folks who said there's something not right about that situation. And every time we go to bed saying there's something just not right, and we close our eyes and we go to sleep and we get up the next morning and we put on our nice suits and ties and we allow it to happen, we apologize not only to you two, but to the countless other people out there who are going through the same experience. So for those 2 apologies, I'll say that. But I also want to say, I just am so pleased, because when you talk about those people who are advocates, there are some damn good people out there who really do care. The system itself, I'm listening because Judge Sotomayor and Judge Breyer are fighting right now in the Supreme Court, fighting because prosecutors are doing what they should not be doing. They are using race to solve, to get convictions where where prosecutors themselves have come with this handbook that says we will not overstep these boundaries. But of course they do, because in the heat of battle, we want to win. For those reasons, we realize where we need to step up is at the Supreme Court level. It's not necessarily a letter to the mayor, but we need to let people understand. We recognize it, we don't appreciate it, and if our system is going to fix itself, it has to fix ourselves from the top down. Because the Supreme Court is allowing some of these non-videotaped confessions to go forward. They're stepping back saying, well, we think it's okay in a 5-4 decision. We're saying, well, maybe next time we'll take a look at it. We know better, we have to do better.
Thank you. Let me just say this as we have to end. Betty Vornberg is here. She said, why are you leaving so early, Charles? Her husband was the former dean here, Jim Vornberg, who brought me to Harvard in the 1980s. And I remember an article he wrote as a former prosecutor about decent restraint of prosecutors. The whole idea is how to use discretion. And it reminds me, for those of you who don't know, if you look at our website on March 27th, which is just 2 weeks away, We're going to have a discussion of the case, the Schwartz case. Remember the case of the young person who did a lot on technology and was prosecuted here in Massachusetts and committed suicide. So we're going to have a discussion about that, the scales of justice, what that really means with the former prosecutors and people who are concerned about technology. The whole idea is to push the envelope to make sure that people can look at those issues as well. I think that what people can do and should do is not only start the dialogue of trying to support what's happened here, but we need to have a mass appearance. When is the next court hearing? We need to be there. We need to tell our folks. We need to tweet and use blogs and everything else to let folks know who are in New York to go to the courthouse.
April 16th PBS broadcast.
And watch the April 16th PBS broadcast with your friends and your enemies. To have them see this, because no one understands what it's really all about. And they come in with skepticism, and then to have that large discussion as we go forward. These gentlemen have a train to catch. They come all the way from New York, and they're going all the way back tonight. So please thank them all for being a part of it tonight.